Martin Cross, and with me today is Tony Malin, MBE. Tony, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on Crossy's Corner. How are you doing this morning?
Very well, very well. I've had walked the dogs, done my emails, was surprised by the election result. So lots happened this morning.
I know I've tried to avoid the news, I must say, when I got up and saw it. But yeah, that's another thing. You've just come back from the head of the Charles, where you won
Yes.
yet another medal, I believe.
Yeah, I got promoted into the 70 plus group.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because your birthday's not till next year, is it?
No, I'm 70 next year. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, how was it?
It was great as always. We had an international crew, two Brits, Boise and myself, two Americans, Dick Cashin and Sean Colgan,
Oh,
and we had four Australians. And I don't know if you know them, Jeff Rees, Fields Rickard. Um, anyway, we had a great crew, and for 4 or 5 months beforehand, these WhatsApps come over the air telling you what ergos you need to do and what you should be achieving, etc., etc. So the pressure's on all the way, but it
yeah.
pays off.
So, how often do you train these days?
I try and train every day,
Oh,
every morning. Doesn't
and
always work out, but it's usually 6 times a week.
what could you say about your scores on the ergo that anyone else would relate to?
A general drift downwards over the years. um, I usually do just long, steady pieces,
Yeah.
uh, and watch the heart rate. I had a little bit of a heart problem about a year ago, so I don't go too far into the red zone for too long.
No. How far into the red zone did you go on the Charles River?
Well, that's an exception. Yeah, they pulled it all out on the head of the river.
So, so you were in this 70 average age crew with giants of the sport, I guess, like Dick Cashin, former world champion in the 70s. How long would you like to carry on for?
Well, I sort of said that this is going to be my last year of racing because I set out a target of 3 races, and we won them all. The Henley Masters in the quad with two Australian friends and Rory. We won the Pairs Head a few weeks ago in our age group, obviously, in a double.
Yeah.
And this race, and I thought maybe maybe it's time to carry on rowing, but stop racing. But then Ian sent me an email the other day saying, "What about the Heineken Cup?" And I've never done that before, uh,
Oh, you've got
so
to.
I might keep going.
Yeah, he's one. Ian, this is Ian McNuff. If you don't know who we're talking about, who's a sort of fellow rower of ours, based at Molesey, and I think Ian said that'll be his last head of the Charles, but it doesn't sound like it'll be his last race. And you would love the Heineken Cup, which is on the Amstel in Amsterdam in I think about March time. And
That's
yeah,
right. It's middle of March, and I've never done it. I've heard about it, and everybody raves that it's a great weekend. So if it comes off, I think I'll do it. So I've got to keep the training going.
yeah, right. Well, that's into the future. But it's interesting to look back at the past, and I know you've got some amazing stories. And that you started your sporting life off in the boxing ring.
Correct. Yeah, when I was a kid, because I come from a long line of prize fighters on my father's side of the family, and they're all pretty ancient. Um, my father was the youngest of the family, and he was born in 1902. So
Wow.
he was 53 when I was born. So it's like growing up with a grandfather. And his elder siblings were much older than him. His next eldest brother was 10 years older, and then the next eldest brother was 13 years older.
Hmm.
And they're all great fighters. And there's a lot of history associated with it. Uncle Harry won 2 golds at 20 and 24 Olympics, and had over 300 fights, never defeated, and retired undefeated champion of the world. So there was quite a lot of history attached to all that. And Uncle Will was a professional street fighter for money.
Oh, you're
So,
joking. How did that work?
well, I don't know exactly how it would work because I wasn't there, but all I know is that he fought in the street, in outside pubs, and they put a ring up, and they're betting and big crowds, and it was bare knuckle stuff.
God, doesn't bear thinking about. So I know we talked about your uncle and his amazing career. I'd forgotten the undefeated 300 fights or so. What's happened to his Olympic medals now?
I've got,
Ah, that's
yeah,
pretty cool.
and also I've got his two Olympic trophies. In those days, you used to get a big trophy with the medal. And so in 1920, it was a bronze figurine of a discus thrower, about that tall.
Yeah.
And in 24, it was a lovely big vase with Greek athletes figurine all the way around the vase. But I'm not sure when they stopped doing that. I think 24 was the last time they did it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Th- that's really interesting. I'm thinking because I know you were born on a council estate in East London, so I'm thinking there wasn't much money in boxing then. Considering your uncle was amazing, your dad was a really good boxer. Your other uncle fought in street fights. Was that the case? It wasn't the way you made a living.
No, no, I was born in Hackney Hospital, lived in a council flat on the edge of Hackney and Islington, and there wasn't much money around. My dad just had an ordinary job. He was a bank messenger, and my mum was a seamstress. So she used to work at night, well, late at night after
Yeah.
I'd gone to bed, and sewing pockets into men's jackets. And big bundles of clothes used to get delivered, of incomplete jackets. And she used to finish them off and put the pockets in, and then with her sewing machine in the kitchen.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it was all it was ordained you were gonna be a boxer. I guess that would have been odd if you weren't a boxer.
I sort of felt the family pressure because everywhere I went with my father, that was the discussion and about the good old days and various fights that they had. So when I was a little kid, he used to take me to the London Ex-Boxers Association meeting they used to go to on a Sunday morning. And I remember sitting next to two old boys, the Daly brothers,
Mm.
who were also street fighters years and years and years ago. They were in their 80s when I was about 6 or 7, and one of them had half an ear.
Oh,
The other one had a part of his nose bitten off, and I was asking them how it happened, and they explained it quite graphically. I couldn't believe it. It was so barbaric.
oh my God.
But when my uncle Harry was in his on his last legs in hospital, I visited him, and I used to go and see him every week. And he said, "How's the fight game, boy?" And I said, "Well, I'm winning more than I'm losing." And he said, losing? What's that? I said, Malins don't lose in the ring. And he was laughing at me. And he said, I said, well, now and again, you know, I don't always win. And he said, do you think you're going to be one of the best? And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, will you get out now and do something else? And that was a release for me.
So he was really influential in your choice that you made at that time to stop
Yeah,
boxing.
well, the old Eton Manor Boxing Club was connected to Eton Mission Rowing Club. And my father was very involved in managing the Eton Manor Sports Club in Hackney. And he took me down there and I had a go and got into it and I enjoyed it.
How old were you at this time, Tony?
About 15.
Ah, and was it like duck to water? You know, you were good at rowing straight away.
Well, I don't know about good. I just enjoyed it. You know,
Yeah,
it was fun. And it was a bit of a release from the pressure of you know, the Malin has to do well at boxing pressure that was on me all the time. It wasn't inflicted actually by my father or my uncle. I just sort of felt it.
yeah. Um, when did it go away? When you started rowing?
Yeah, yeah, it went away pretty quickly.
Yeah. So, what I'd like to understand in terms of rowing is your sort of profile through the sport because you got did you get good enough at Eton Mission to try for a junior rowing team or go to trials, or was that when you joined Crowland?
No, I joined Crowland first because at Eton Mission it was just myself and one other kid called David Soane. And so there was only two of us there. It's a tiny little club near Old Ford on the River Lee. And we saw the boats from Spring Hill coming up and down, particularly Crowland, looking quite sharp and smart. And so we thought, let's go down there and see what happens. And then there was a small junior section, and that's where I met Steve Simpole.
Ah, talk to us
And
about who he is and what he was like.
well, Steve's someone you ought to have on Crossy's Corner, actually. He's an interesting character. But he got a write up in Dan Topolsky's book as the hardest man he ever met. No, Steve was a really driven athlete. He was a good all rounder, good running, good strength. I think his weight to
Power.
output power ratio was very, very good.
Yeah, because he was a lightweight, wasn't he?
He was a lightweight and he was 3 times world champion.
Yeah. Um, so did you two like row in pairs or fours or what?
Well, we were coached by this guy called Fred Johnson. I don't know if you remember him at all.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah.
larger than life character from the Lee. And his bark was worse than his bite, but he had plenty of bark. And he put us in a cock's pair when we weighed about 11 stone. And
Oh,
and we went to the Nat Champs and we came third and we came second in the national schools.
is that like 1972 we're talking now?
Yeah,
Okay.
72, 73, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the progress that we made. We were racing a cock's pair and the training schedules were, now when you look back at it, were ridiculous. You know, we're doing 10s and 20s and then you end up doing a 1500-meter piece. And I remember one time we were doing a piece with Fred barking at us on the bank. And he said, right, let's do a gate to bridge, which is about 500 meters. And then he said, let's do the men on, keep going to the bend. And then we get to the bend and he said, now let's go to Frenchman's Point. And we're sort of hanging out the boat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then you never trust him again. You know,
No.
you're going to do a piece. Are we going to do that piece, or are we going to do a different piece? So anyway, this is all a long time ago, and I think we were all sort of fishing around in the dark, didn't really know what we were doing from a training perspective, but
Yeah.
just loved rowing. And we went to regattas every week and all around the country, and that was great fun.
So where did you meet this guy? Was it from Radley or Eton that you rode with? What was that context?
Well, that was Henry Clay.
Oh, it
That
was
was,
Henry Clay.
yeah, that was Henry.
Oh, the Olympic silver medalist.
Yes.
And I think
And
he
he got
got
a silver medal, didn't he, in the pair as a junior?
in the junior with Money Coots.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Christie. Yeah.
yeah. I've rode with Henry, so we've both rode with Henry. So the guy with the jumpers and the Clay family had a stock of jumpers and sweaters that they kind of traded round father to son, and presumably Henry's still wearing the same jumper now.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. So how did tell us what happened there?
Well, what happened there was I was in the squad, and we were going to Hammersmith training, and we'd alternate who drove each other. You know, because he rented a place quite near where I lived, and so we would team up and drive to Hammersmith in the evenings and chat in the car. And it's a bit like the Odd Couple, you know. He was head boy at Eton. He was he went to president of Cambridge. He was a metallurgist, and at that time I was studying to be an accountant
Yeah.
and doing auditing. So we're chatting away in the car, and I'm saying to him, Henry, I hate my job. It's terrible. You know, this auditing business is like watching paint dry. I know I've got to get through it. You know, it's like a key to a door, but it's horrible every day. And he's saying, well, I love my job. It's great. He said, I work for Delta Metal. I do all sorts of interesting things. And he got fed up with me moaning. He said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I quite fancy getting into this merchant banking business. I said, but I'm from the wrong side of the tracks to get into that world. I said, it's more your cup of tea.
Yeah.
He said, well, give it a go. Why don't you write to my dad at Hambros? And I didn't know his dad from Adam, but his dad was deputy chairman. But he also was a rower. And he rowed for Cambridge as well. No, he rowed for Oxford, actually.
Yeah.
He rowed for Oxford. And so I wrote a letter, you know, writing out my CV, etc. And then I got a letter back from the personnel department, not from John Clay, saying sort of don't call us, we'll call you type letter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a couple of months later, I got another letter saying, would you like to come and interview for a post in the leasing department as an analyst for the marketing manager? I said, yeah, sure. So I went for that. And when I got into this interview, the personnel guy who was interviewing me said, look, don't get your hopes up, he said, because there's 25 people going for this role. So I thought, what a way to start an interview. Anyway, we got through the interview, and then 2 weeks later, I got a letter that said, would you like to have the job? And here's the salary, blah, 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 which was 50% more than what I was earning. So I jumped at it. Then roll forward many, many years to about 12 years ago. And I was at Henley Regatta, and I bumped into the old personnel director at Hambros, a guy called Mark Wolfson,
Ah.
who was archetypal Hambros, sort of Eton, Oxbridge and the Guards,
Yeah.
and MP for Sevenoaks. But he was in his 80s. And I said, Mark, tell me, how did I get that job? I said, my academic record's not much to write home about. And there must have been a lot more people better qualified than me. And he said, well, Tony, old boy, he said, with a plum in his mouth. He said, we can't have Etonians doing second-hand car leasing, can we? So that's how I got into Hambros.
That's ridiculous. So, did this? Have I got wrong? The stories that you're like in the post room or making tea or something like that. That's not
No,
right.
no, no. I did have a proper job.
Yeah.
I was doing analysis work for the marketing manager, analysing various companies that would be good targets to go and hit for selling leasing products.
Ah.
And so it was a sort of tax-based product in those days.
Yeah.
And I was quite lucky because 3 months after I joined, this guy was promoted to a different department, and I just sort of picked up what he was doing, managed to get a couple of deals over the line, and they gave me his role. So I was very lucky to get a sort of a lift up the ladder in 3 months, which normally would have taken several years.
Yeah. What year are we talking about for this, Tony?
Well, I joined in April 78. It was going to be October 77, but I had a really bad accident on my leg.
Oh,
And that
is
put me
that when
out.
you were running?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, right. We can talk about that. Yeah.
yeah.
So I kind of want to come back to that, and I want to sort of fill in, the rowing stuff. But you mentioned the running thing, and I remember you telling me about that many years ago, and listening agog to what you were saying. So do you mind telling that story again?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was in the squad, and it was in that sort of period where you're just getting ready to start training again, October time. And I'm preparing myself, and I was down the lead doing some circuits, and I went for a run, and it was dark, and I ran around Springfield Park, which I knew like the back of my hand, and I had a dog with me, my friend's dog, who used to like running with me. And as I ran, there's a steep hill in Springfield Park called Spring Hill, and as I ran down, sorry about that. So,
He's heard you talk about another dog.
yeah, he did. Yeah. Anyway, as I was running down the hill, I didn't know that the day before they put some metal spikes at the bottom of the hill, uh, uh, metal posts, not spikes, posts, to stop the skateboarders running down the hill. And I couldn't see it because it was in the dark. I ran
Yeah.
straight into it, and it ripped the inside of my leg off, and I collapsed. And then the dog brought me round. He licked my face and brought me round. And I put my hand down, and it was all like a load of jelly. And I couldn't move. And I shouted because I was only about 300 meters away from the boathouse. And I was dead lucky that the Barts Hospital student trainees were there rowing. They rushed over to me, put a tourniquet on, otherwise I would have bled to death. So I was dead lucky that they were there.
Yeah. So you can owe your life to the dog and who woke you up, and the people who put a tourniquet on.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Um, so it, I want to go back to the Henley stuff and whatever, but in terms of, I know you were in the squad. Did that stop you getting into the GB international team? That injury?
Well, yeah, I was sort of on the edge of it. I was spare man in '77 for
Yeah,
Amsterdam, and I thought, right, I'm going to get back into this now. Um, and then this happened. So really, it sort of knocked the stuffing out of me for. I mean, I started Hambros on crutches,
yeah,
so I was out of it for a year. And then I tried to get back in, and because I had my eyes on trying to get in for the Olympics in 1980, um, but I just couldn't get to the standard that I was at. It was very difficult.
Yeah. Um, and that year out had really cost you.
That really cost me. And I was in the trials, and but you know, I just couldn't get back to the same level.
Yeah. Um, what regrets, if any, do you have about that at all?
Well, I wish I'd never gone for a run. And that's the main regret.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but I feel that the great thing about rowing is the camaraderie that it creates and the friendships that it generates. And looking back on things, I don't think I've missed out on that.
no,
I may have missed out on potentially higher achievements, um, but I rode with some great characters and who are great friends today, and that sort of dwarfs everything else.
yeah,
That's what rowing's all about at our age.
yeah. Here, here. I would say at any age really, but particularly at our age. I want to take you back to the mid '70s, and you got involved in this four at Thames Tradesmen. So I know you, the four of you that were in this crew are all East End boys. So what are you doing in the west of London at Thames Tradesmen?
Well, that's an interesting story. We Steve and I had had enough of Fred Johnson's coaching techniques, and we felt that there wasn't really anyone else at the Lee that we could row with where we could progress. And Johnny Roberts and Bob Milligan felt exactly the same thing at Poplar. So
Ah,
we were at a Poplar regatta, I think, and had a couple of beers and had a chat and said, why don't we try out a four? So we went out in a four at the Lee, and it seemed to click quite nicely. Fred was on the bank, and I think he thought he was going to coach us, and we had different thoughts. And Freddie Smallbones suggested that we should go up to Tradesmen, where they give us a good boat to row in, the Uniflow. Do you
the
remember that
Uniflow,
boat?
the car leash. Yeah,
The car leash, the wooden car leash,
yeah,
and Jim Relton would coach us, and that was a revelation because the coaching and the programs were far more professional.
yeah.
But he became a bit of a struggle because on a Saturday morning we go out, have the outing, he'd come out with us in the boat, but then he'd go in the bar,
Oh,
and we couldn't get him out of the bar for the second outing. and and we thought that this isn't ideal. And then we were chatting to Billy Mason, and he gave us a few tips. And I think we were the first crew that Billy Mason
wow.
coached. And he was still in the national squad at the time, but he had great insights. He's the best coach I've ever been coached by.
What can you give any examples of why? I mean, I know it's a long time ago, but
Yeah,
what made him that?
he um, he had a great way of making you want to do better. Um, he had all sorts of interesting techniques on training that he would do. So before we went out rowing, we used to run round the cemetery in
Yeah,
our Wellington boots
yeah,
as a warm up, but we had to race each other. Everything was racing each other.
mm,
Everything we did in the gym, it was all competitive. And then on a Sunday, quite often after the row, he said, right, I've entered you in a cross country run. And we used to go Richmond Park or Blackheath or somewhere.
yeah,
And and then he had interesting approaches to life. He said, look, I know you're going to go out on a Saturday night. He said, I know you're going to go and have a few beers. I'm not going to stop you doing that, but I want you to dance. I want you to find a girl and dance, so you're training when you're going out and not just standing still and drinking a beer.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
So, that year you were in the Y folds at Henley in '75,
correct.
and you went through that competition and you won.
Yeah,
Um, so, how big a deal was that for you?
I think that was the biggest deal ever
Oh,
because looking up at Henley as an East End kid at the Lee, that was sort of almost a goal that was unachievable.
yeah.
And then to achieve it, it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Steve was really cool about the whole thing. As we finished, like Johnny Roberts and Mixie and myself, we were sort of elated and smiling, and as we were rowing in, Steve says, "Don't smile, don't smile. Look cool."
Yeah, yeah. Um, so next year, '76 is the Olympic year. I mean, how much did you have? Did any of you guys in that four have your sights on Montreal as a possibility?
We tried, but we weren't quick enough. I think we went to the trials, but I think it was it the eight from 74 split into fours, didn't it?
Yeah, and well, Billy was in the four that actually your coach Billy Mason was bowing
Yeah,
that four that ended up going, but they did split into fours in '75. Yeah,
yeah. But I can't remember what happened in 76. It was an eight, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we tried for that, but we maybe a bit young, not not fast enough, basically.
So, so there's this.
But
You're a
we missed out on that, and so did some guys, um, some other guys who were training for it. So we clubbed together and jumped in the grand.
right. So you didn't just jump in the grand though. You jumped in to you doubled up. Whose idea
Yeah,
was that?
that was Ian Wilson's idea. So we doubled up, and Ian and Andy Bowes, Lee Brown, and John Birch, they did the Philip,
Philip. Yeah.
yeah, and we did the stewards, and
Which was the straight final, I think.
it was a straight final. It was a straight final, and
But the road to it was complicated because
yeah, I tell you what happened. Um, they rearranged the timing of the grand because we were doubling up. So they made the grand at midday, and they made our race at sort of last race of the day or something, right at the back end, and the Philip was just before it. So the stewards were very helpful, and so we were racing Leander in the final, and after I don't know by about the quarter mile, Leander stopped rowing, and we carried on to the end. And if
hard.
you remember, pretty hard, yeah, because we had plenty of time to recover. If you remember, it was a very hot summer.
Yeah.
I think it was the first year that jackets were removed after several old boys fainted in the stewards. And anyway, we got to the end, and then we were told we got to re-row it. And they said, well, it was outside the first 100 meters, you know.
Yeah.
And they said, no, Henley rules are different to international FISA rules. And they had something called on their rudder. So we're going to re-row it. And we're going to re-row it half an hour before the stewards.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
You are joking. There wasn't that close.
yeah. So what happened was we had to go up and race the final of the grand, which we won by a length or something. So it's a hard
It was
race.
less than that actually. It was two thirds because I looked.
Two thirds.
I watched the race actually.
Oh,
Um,
right.
yeah, and I think you should again. I think it's Mostyn Fields got it on YouTube. Just to look at your technique back then? Because I'm sure you're rowing better now, Tony.
I'm sure I am. Yeah, I'm sure I am. The old adage was time up the slide is time wasted.
Yeah. You were at Bow in that 8, so that was a tough race that you had, I think, against
That was
Leander.
a tough race, and they had the boat, the four, out for us, ready to get out of the 8, get in the 4, and row back up again. And it was 95 degrees in the shade, and we were all pretty spent. Anyway, we had the Canadians in the final. We came off the start like a wet rag. It was a terrible, terrible row. And then, funnily enough, it all sort of clicked together in the last 500, and we went from 3 lengths down and lost by 6 foot or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's the
Did,
one that got away.
yeah. So a grand winner. I mean, I think winning the grand is just an amazing feat for anybody, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it was quite an achievement. You felt pretty good afterwards.
Yeah. Can I take you back to Hambros, and you kind of talked about you made that jump. And what I'd like to know is your take on how come you made it up to the very top of Hambros, to the top tier. What was it you had about you that helped you make those steps?
I don't know. I think I started off feeling a bit like a fish out of water because all my work colleagues were from very different backgrounds to myself. But nonetheless, I made some very good friends there and some that have lasted forever. Um, I think what happened was that I was very good at making money, and that was very much appreciated. And so the class issue melted away,
Yeah.
and I kept getting promotions to run various things. I think the big jump was when I was sent to Australia. I was asked if I would go to Australia because Hambros had a small operation in Sydney where they did some bond issues and a little bit of corporate finance advice, M&A advice in Australia. And they had a few big clients like News Corp and TNT and Pioneer Concrete, so big companies in Australia. And so I was sent out to see if a structured finance and project finance type business could be put together out there. So I was asked to go for 3 months to do a study. So when I got to Australia, I met up with John Boltby,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
who introduced me to Ian Clubb and Sydney Rowing Club. So I joined Sydney Rowing Club, and that was the best thing I ever did. And that
Why?
it got me into real society in Australia, rather than mixing in the expat finance world. I was mixing with the real salt of the earth Australians. So
Yeah.
I was in an 8 with a doctor, an outboard motor mechanic, a tiler, a lawyer, and invited back to have dinner with them at their houses, etc. So and that was fantastic for me. And in the evenings, I sometimes go out on my windsurfer at Balmoral Beach. I had a lovely little apartment that they rented for me. I had a whale of a time for this 3 months. Anyway, after the 3 months, it was time for me to go back and report back, and I had to go and see the chairman of the bank. And he said, well, what's your prognosis? I said, well, 3 months isn't long enough. I said, I need some more time because I was having such a great time out there. I said, I need at least 6 months. He said, well, you better have a decision at the end of 6 months. So I flew back out there, and then I managed to put this deal together that made quite a lot of money. And then he phoned me up and he said, congratulations, I think you ought to stay there and develop the business yourself. So I stayed there for 3 years.
Wow.
And I rowed for Sydney Rowing Club, and we won the state championships, and we had a whale of a time and made friends that have lasted forever.
Yeah. Just out of interest, because I know you are like a member of more rowing clubs in the world, maybe than anyone else. Almost, I'm thinking. But you row for Melbourne University Boat Club. Is that a much later tie up?
That's a later tie-up, yeah, with Peter Anthony, who I got to know, who everybody knows in the rowing world. He's a
Yes.
wonderful character, and he started the campaign for the Heads of the Charles, and his club is Melbourne University. But then there was a little bit of angst at Melbourne University of all these outsiders rowing who are not full-time members. And so there's an old club which was sort of defunct that had no members called Upper Yarra.
Ah.
So he reinvigorated and registered Upper Yarra. And so we all row for Upper Yarra now in from these various parts of the world.
Ah, right. That's interesting. So, were you when you met your wife, now sadly departed Lou? Were you away rowing in Belgium at that time?
No, I actually had finished trying to get into the international scene for that was in 1985 in Hazelwinkel, the World Championships,
Yeah.
and I volunteered to tow the boats over.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So I did the boat transport with Jeremy Randall did it
Oh,
as
Jeremy
well.
Randall. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I was staying at the Sweetel Hotel in Antwerp
yeah.
with many of the team. And as I walked in, you know, there are three girls on reception, and two of them were occupied with people checking in, and one wasn't. And I quite liked the look of the one that was occupied, so I hung back and waited till she was free, and then went and checked in with her, and that was
Oh,
Lou.
yeah, 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 yeah. And obviously it was incredibly difficult for you and your family and Lou what you know you had to go through. Um, but I guess if there was any comfort in that, that the service at the Henley Church, where you had people flying in, you know, from Australia and all over the world,
Yeah,
must have been a comfort.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was. I'm sure she would have liked to have been there
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
in a funny way, um, but it was it was a wonderful occasion. Um, I almost felt slightly embarrassed that I, in a funny way, enjoyed the memorial,
Ah,
and I felt guilty
yeah.
um, of having that feeling. But it was so nice that so many people had turned up, and I was so proud of the kids, the way that they spoke.
Yeah, that was absolutely compelling. I think a very different type of tributes to their mum that they made.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and and I guess you've thrown yourself into things. Well, I know you have thrown yourself into things since Lou passed away. Just
yeah.
to
I mean, the thing to do, I think, is keep busy and not make any major decisions about what you're going to do for at least a year.
yeah,
So what have I done? Well, I've carried on rowing. I row here at Henley. I work in the office. I travel a bit with work. And I suppose the one thing I have done is I've engaged in a new dog. I've got a new puppy,
yeah, yeah,
Labrador,
yeah.
called Rudy, and he's a sweetie. So I'm glad I got him. He's 6 months old now.
Oh, lovely. Yeah,
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Um, can I just take you? What was it a logical progression from your level at Hambros to Star Capital, the company you founded?
No, it was very illogical, really. I sort of climbed the tree at Hambros, and every time you became more successful at making money, you get promoted and more responsibility. And I became less efficient as that happened because I'm not a great manager of lots of people. And I ended up being responsible for 400 or 500 people. And that took me away from the coalface of actually doing transacting.
Mm.
And I was managing lots of people. And there were some other parts of Hambros that were getting a bit wobbly. So in the M&A department, there was a large transaction that went wrong. And the Bank of England weren't very pleased about it. And to cut a long story short, the bank was sold to a French bank called SocGen,
Mm.
Societe Generale. And I stayed on for about 6 months to help with the integration. But I thought, I'm not going to stay here because someone like me in a French bank, I haven't got a glass ceiling, I've got a solid concrete one. And then I had a couple of interests. I always wanted to start my own business. That
Yes.
was always the case for all the time I was at Hambros. That was my objective, to leave Hambros and start my own business. This was the impetus to do it.
Mm.
And I had a couple of good job offers from a couple of big investment banks with quite large sort of guaranteed remuneration for a couple of years. And I said to Lou, I think I'll defer starting something because Hambros never paid you lots of money. I said, I think I'll defer it and take one of these jobs. And then after a couple of years, we're a bit more secure because we had 3 little kids at that time. And Lou said to me, I think you should go for it. She said, I don't want to live with someone. She says, you go and join those banks, you'll never leave. And I don't want to live with someone who's looking over their shoulder all the time, talking about what might have been.
Yeah.
She said, and then she said, we can always adjust our living standards if it doesn't work out. Don't worry about that. Go and give it a go. And so it was down to her really. And I went for it. And it took me about 2 years to get things going. And so I was doing a little bit of consulting work and odd jobs during that period to make ends meet. Lou was working for a German fashion company called Klaus Steilmann, and the kids were at school at nursery school. And then I managed to get some good equity financial backers, and off we went.
Yeah.
It
How old
was.
is Star Capital now?
I got the first commitment in December 99, so it's 25 years old nearly.
Wow, that's quite an established company at 25 years, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it is. It's done well. I've been lucky to get some very good people to come in with me. I'd
Yeah.
never get a job at my place now. If I was 25, I wouldn't get a look in.
Well, that's interesting because obviously you had some amazing qualities that you can be flexible and suit to the environment you find yourself in. When did the charity that you founded? Yes, Youth Experience for Kids, is it?
Youth experience in sport.
In sport, sorry. When did that appear on the scene? And tell me about your decision to found it.
Yeah, it was about 12 years ago, I guess. And the impetus was that when I was young, um, I got into all sorts of mischief, which we won't go into now. But
I
I
was just
think if
about to ask you.
it's too embarrassing.
Okay.
But if rowing hadn't have happened and sport hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be here today, I'm sure. I got into all sorts of trouble. And that was, looking back on that, it made me realize the magic that sport has to put kids on the right path in life. You know, the harder you try, the better you get.
Mm,
Uh, how to relate to people, communicate with people. Um, it just gives you the right attitude to succeed.
mm,
So I thought, why not start something that gets some of these wayward kids back onto the right path?
yeah.
And so that was the impetus really. And it's quite interesting that how effective it is. You know, we've seen lots of incidents of kids who are into all sorts of trouble, ending up being far more normal and natural and adjusted to society.
Mm. That must feel so affirming that that's something that you've been able to begin and support and see through.
Yeah, it gives you a buzz every time you go around and see these clubs. What we actually do is, I don't know what it was like at your school, but at my school, um, I reckon there were probably 2 in 10 teachers who you looked up to, who had that gravitas, who had that ability to encourage you to want to impress them, you know,
Mm, yeah.
and they had natural control in the classroom. And there was probably 20% of the teachers at my school, and the rest you had control basically. Um, and uh, and so what we do is we go around various sports clubs in London, more towards the poorer areas, and we look for coaches and leaders who have got that gravitas, who've got that magic, who the kids look up to,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then uh, by and large they'll have poor facilities. So we give them more power to their elbow, we give them more facilities, more equipment, so that they can perform their magic on a wider scale. And it's much better than trying to start something. You start something, it's cumbersome. Have you got the right people? It's best to find quality. It's just like private equity. You find a quality manager and you back
Mm.
them with the right resources to do what they do well. And that's the essence of what's Yes is all about. And I've got a wonderful CEO, Rebecca Scowen,
Yeah.
who's a world champion rower, who you know very well,
Yes.
and she does a great job.
And I is it something you're looking to sort of expand to other areas of the UK?
Yes, eventually, yes. Well, we're looking for more sponsorship, more support to do that.
Yeah.
And what happened some years ago, which was a terrible political mistake, you remember the old GLC that used to
Yes.
run London? They had a big budget for sports clubs, and the sports club community was thriving in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then when that was disbanded, the budget disappeared and a lot of clubs disappeared. A lot of youth clubs and sports clubs
Mm.
disappeared. And I don't think government really realise the impact that sport can have on young people. Not necessarily going out and winning medals,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but just stabilising society. And we need it today more than ever, you know,
yeah.
more than ever. The
Um,
youth crime, particularly violent crime, is astronomical in London now.
yeah. Um, I know, and I guess the feeling that you're taking a small chunk out of that is important. I mean, um, can I mean, one of the things I know you and Lou have a lovely home, had a lovely home in near Henley, and some of the crews. I think you put crews up during the regatta, or have put crews up during the
Yes,
regatta.
yeah, we've
Uh,
had quite a few crews here, and Westminster School came here quite a bit,
yeah,
and it's fun having them around actually at the regatta time.
yeah. And did you have the Huskies over there?
No, we haven't had the Huskies.
Ah, okay.
Maybe we
That
should.
Well, I know they did come over, didn't they? I think last year. So,
Yeah,
what did you make of the whole Olympic thing in Paris earlier this year? Did you get a chance to see any of it?
I went.
Ah,
Um, I didn't go to the rowing because the finals were spread over several days, and I went to the trials in Lucerne and saw everybody there,
yeah,
and it's much more convivial and
yes,
more
definitely.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I skipped the rowing and I took the family because it's 100 years since Uncle Harry won the gold in the chariots
Oh,
fire
yeah,
Olympics.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we went to celebrate his 100-year achievement and toasted him. So my three kids, my single grandchild, and their partners came along, and we had a great time. And we saw lots of boxing, saw some cycling, saw some swimming.
Yeah.
We had great fun. We got up. I got them up early one Sunday morning and said, "Right, we're going to go out cycling before breakfast." And we grabbed those line bikes because there's no cars in Paris. They've all been kept out on the Sunday. And
Ah,
so we went up the Champs-Élysées and round the Arc de Triomphe and went everywhere on these bikes. And it was
oh,
great
wow.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It, that reminds me of something. I don't know if calling you a fanatical cyclist is an accurate description, but I kind of had that impression about you. You were like lean, mean, keen. You were doing
Enthusiastic.
all right. No, well, all right. Yeah, yeah. Maybe there's a fine line. Just talk to me about cycling. What drew you to that?
Well, it's interesting. Cashing got me into it
Yeah. Can
because
you
he
just explain who Cashin? I mean, I know we've said he was a world champion, but he's got
Big
other.
Cashin is quite a character, larger than life. He was world champion in '74, and he's a very successful businessman and founded a private equity business in America called One Equity Partners. And he was very helpful when I was starting my business as well, in both advice and bringing capital to my business as well. So he's been a very important figure in my life,
Mm.
and rode with him for the first time this year at the head of the Charles. The
No,
first
that
time I
was the
ever rode
first
with him.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Has
he's a
he
phenomenal athlete.
has he still got it?
Oh yeah, I mean, he's won the world championships on the ergo several times in his age group.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's definitely a genetic outlier,
Right.
shall we
Yeah.
say? And he was he was mad keen on cycling, and I was talking to him when I was starting my business. He was giving me some help and advice, as rowers do to one another.
Yeah.
Um, and he was talking about cycling, how much fun it was. So I decided to get myself a bike and start training on the bike. And the thing that hooked me was I'm at that stage in my mid 40s, and it was something I was getting better at. You know,
Ah.
the earth scores were trending on a downward slope,
Yeah.
but every year I was getting a bit better at cycling, and that really encouraged me. You know, I was getting a little bit quicker every year doing the training, and by that age, you sort of you start to know how to train properly, and you do
Mm.
the reading and you do the analysis, and there's plenty on the internet, etc., that you can take, so you can train more scientifically. And I loved it. And Lou and I got a place in Switzerland,
Mm.
in a place called Klosters, and the cycling out there is fantastic because all the roads are like there's no potholes at all. There's no
Yeah.
cracks. It's like cycling on a billiard table. It's beautiful. So that encouraged me as well. And then I started to organise some tours with groups of friends who I suppose 90% of them were old oarsmen,
Yeah.
and uh, and it seems to be a natural progression. But these days, one's a little bit worried about cycling, given the number of accidents. I mean, you look at the poor old Malcolm and the crash that he had,
Yes,
Malcolm McGowan,
yes,
and you have to be so careful. And the trouble is with oarsmen is they've got this racing fanaticism inbuilt, and no matter what the challenge is ahead, even if there's a sharp bend coming, you want to get there first. And you've got to try and bridle that particular emphasis in your natural makeup as an oarsman to cycle safe.
yeah, yeah. So next year's obviously you've got a big birthday coming up. You've got your new dog who's made his presence known already.
Yeah.
Um, what else is there? You mentioned the Heineken Cup as
Yes.
maybe a potential little thing. What else might there be?
Well, there are 3 1-week holidays I'm doing. After Lou passed, I said to the kids, we never spend much time together, like extended time
Mm,
together. We used to do it when they were little. I used to do long weekends away, one on one.
mm,
But then as they got older, it's increasingly difficult to get time in their diaries.
yeah.
So, I said, let's do 3 really fun weeks together. So the first one is next week,
Oh wow.
and that's with my son, and we're going to Uruguay, and we're going to go horse riding and play gauchos and live like cowboys.
Wow.
So that's the first one. And then in February next year, I'm going with my youngest daughter, and we're going to cycle around North Vietnam. Um, and
Oh my God.
and then the third one with my eldest daughter in May next year, and for a week we're going up to the Arctic Circle to Svalbard, and we're going to see the polar bears and all the activity up there. So
Oh,
that's where I'm really looking forward to, those 3 1 weeks away with the 3 kids.
yeah, that sounds amazing. I love that. I didn't ask you, and I meant to. You were awarded an MBE, obviously very justifiably. How big a deal was that?
An enormous surprise. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I thought
Oh,
they
really?
picked the wrong address. Yeah. Um, and that you get a phone call and they say, if it was offered to you, would you accept it? So of course I would.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's for the yes activity, I think.
yeah, yeah. That's good. Well, Tony, we've been talking for over an hour now. I suspect we could go on with more stories about more people. I take your shout about Steve Simpole,
Yeah,
and
yeah, he'd be a good one to chat to.
as a character to talk to. It's amazing your rich and varied life path, which I'm sure will continue for many years to come. But let's end the live part of this interview now.
Okay, cheers, Martin. Thanks very much.